I'm just reading a little bit of the official statement of Michael Stone's passing, and it's a really sad story. And I read over his About Me page on his website, and he doesn't say anything about having a diagnosis himself. And it says in his official statement on his passing that he was close to sharing his diagnosis and his struggles. But it seems like he hid his struggles, and it also says he seemed unshakable and capable of holding everyone else's suffering, and he did, but he struggled with his own, and that he lived with bipolar disorder his whole life, and it's just really tragic. And I feel like I don't want to kid myself about being able to hold other people's suffering. It's actually difficult for me even just witnessing these last few days of my life and seeing people obviously suffering. A lot of it seemed like physical manifestations of side effects of medications. So I really don't feel like I can hold anyone's suffering. I feel like I suffer too. I suffer if I see someone suffering and reading their body and their energy. I can sense that they're suffering, then I'm suffering. It's not a separate thing. So, of course, I will see that every day in my life, but I don't know if I can purposefully go out there and feel like I can help people with their suffering. And in the statement, it says, in 2015, Michael shared, "You'd think that given all this inner work, an incredible network of support, strong friendships, a loving partner and kids, and lastly, a life dedicated to embodying the Dharma, literally every single day includes practice and study, that I'd be immune to extreme mental states. It can be hard to admit, even to ourselves, that there are times when the stability of awareness that we discover in meditation just isn't there. When this started happening, I'd say my practice needs to get deeper, but the truth is, there was a chemical change in my brain." As versed as Michael was with the silence around mental health issues in our culture, he feared the stigma of his diagnosis. He was on the cusp of revealing publicly how shaped he was by bipolar disorder and how he was doing. And it said he had more extreme mania starting in the spring of this year, and the psychiatrist upped his medication. So it's not like he was on medication and it prevented his death. It seems like he was on medication and his death actually could have been somewhat of a side effect of the medication or the increased medication. Who knows? It's hard to say. Or that he sought a more powerful drug, such as something with fentanyl in it. And I don't really know much about fentanyl, but apparently a lot of things are laced with fentanyl, so one might not be intending to do fentanyl, but it's in whatever one takes, and that is not good. And some of his organs were donated, and the statement was put together by his partner, and it says, "It could be easy to shake one's head and think, what a shame. Culturally, we don't have enough language to talk about this. Rather than feel the shame and tragedy of it, can we find questions? What was he feeling? How was he coping? What am I uncomfortable hearing? What can we do for ourselves and others who have impulses or behaviors we cannot understand? Impulses that scare us and silence us. How can we take care of each other?" And the question asks, what was he feeling? Well, he was likely feeling a lot more suffering than just his own personal suffering. And I've talked a lot about with myself how sensitive people feel a lot more, and oftentimes we don't know where it's coming from or why. If we were just feeling the so-called normal daily dose of suffering that we all have, then he likely wouldn't have felt impelled to take a street drug for relief. He was searching for relief. He wasn't searching to get high and have a good time. And unfortunately, he got the ultimate relief. And I feel like I can sense how terrified he was and struggling. And sometimes I go into those states too. And usually I end up in the hospital. And then they medicate me, and it's difficult to go through. And I've talked a lot about keeping the body safe. So if I'm in an altered state of consciousness where I'm terrified, I don't want to be out and about walking around in reality, because I will stumble on something that will harm me. So that's why I have a zap strap. I would just zap strap myself somewhere and prevent me from doing something that is going to harm my body, and just allow the psychological stuff to happen. And it's so painful. It is indescribably painful. And I guess that's one of the things about going to the psych ward, is that it can keep people safe, in that one isn't wandering around out in society where one might do something harmful to the body to relieve the pain, even something like stepping out in front of a car or something to end one's life to stop the suffering. And maybe he took on other people's suffering, and he wanted to be altruistic, but at the same time, if one is sensitive, one's going to take on other suffering even more, and then it's going to make it more difficult to live. So for me, I have to keep my stress really low. So it's important to design one's life in alignment with one's sensitivities. If I was to go back to working in peer support, I don't know if hearty nutritionals would be enough to numb me out to all the suffering that I would be seeing. And maybe since he was so successful at helping others, maybe he, and I don't know what I'm saying this, I'm not trying to say anything here that's right or wrong or true. I'm actually responding to the questions on the statement regarding his death, saying, rather than feel the shame and tragedy of it, can we find questions? What was he feeling? How was he coping? So I'm answering their questions from my own perspective at this moment, and hopefully others will do the same. And it seemed like he was coping by being super altruistic and helping so many people, but at the same time, he was struggling a lot. And that's the thing, if one has that energy of so-called mania, one can get a lot done and seem really great, and then when that crashes, it's really difficult to get through the crash. So it's something difficult to think about for me, because I talk about things like I want to embody my mania, so doing things in daily life that will help build the neurology, so when that manic energy comes in, one might not even notice. Yet this man was doing a lot of practices and things to cope with what those energies were doing, but it didn't seem to really necessarily do that which I've been talking about. So I've been talking about a lot of things all along, and this man, the tragedy of his death sort of challenges a lot of what I've been saying to myself. I can think to myself all I want, that by moving in epigenetic ways, I'll be able to embody something that can move with this energy as it comes in. But this man seems to be quite a wonderful example of being altruistic and doing good things for the body and being healthy, yet this energy came in and took his life from the world. And sometimes I also feel like this tragic end for someone with a bipolar label in this world isn't necessarily the end of their world. And I don't know if that's true, but I've talked about those possibilities. Like his energy just couldn't coexist with this world anymore. Doesn't mean that it was the end for sure, but I feel that a transition into the light body world looks like a tragic end in the material world. The material world that we share with the people that we love, yet sometimes it seems like we can't stay here with them indefinitely. And I've talked about this from my experience, how when I went through that first energetic process, that first state of map consciousness and trance consciousness, when I was taken to the psych ward and I realized that I was going to live as a mental patient, I felt like that was an okay exchange, because that meant that I could stay with all my loved ones. Because I had a sense that there might be a tragic end for me and I would go on in some other dimension. But I wouldn't be with all the people that I love and I wanted to be here. So sometimes I really feel like this is bonus time. And I don't even know how much time I have left. I'd like to assume that I have a lot by doing some of the things that I've talked about with myself, including talking to myself and embodying my mania and being altruistic and setting up some kind of peer-run social enterprise and all these things I want to do, but maybe I won't even get a chance to do them. And this man, he did get a chance to do a lot of things. He set up ways he could teach and help people and coach people, and his website is quite amazing, and it seems like he had a lot of people around him that he was helping and teaching, and that's amazing. And sometimes I feel like I might want to create something to help people, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if anyone can help anyone. Here's this man, Michael Stone, that was helping other people, so many people, and he didn't have help for himself. And I'm not talking about help as in psychiatric help or whatever, and he was accepting that kind of help, and it didn't save his life. And that's part of what I talk about with myself, is this psych med type help doesn't save people's lives necessarily. And I just read that article that I saw on Twitter the other day, and it made me kind of angry. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago, that they're like, accepting help is never worse than any of the worst side effects. Well, one of the side effects of meds is suicide. And it's likely that was a contributing factor in this man's death. He was on meds and he still left this world by an action to try to feel better. So the meds weren't working, and who knows if this wasn't an iatrogenic death. And I found out about this tragedy through Dr. Kelly Brogan's website, and she's the person that I learned the term iatrogenic illness from, which is doctor-induced illness, or worsening of what one started with. So if one started with some symptoms of some kind and then is put on meds and then is dead, well, that was iatrogenic. It made it worse, not better. Or ends up worse off than if it makes it better. Oh, well, the meds worked. I really don't know. But that article really made me mad, that other one about, oh, just get help. He eventually did get help from that kind of system, and it ultimately didn't help. He lived his whole life maybe without that, or who knows. I don't know the story. I don't know his life. But however long he was on these other treatments through psychiatry, well, whether it was 10 years or 2 years or 1 month, now he's not alive anymore. And this is a powerful lesson for many. And I don't know how they can spin this in, oh, he didn't get help. He was getting help, and he's still not alive. So do they ever write an article about how when you do get the psychiatric help, you can still end up dead? And show all the examples of that? I doubt it. Yet, if one is on the treatment of psychiatry and then dies, then it's just a tragic death of someone with a really severe mental illness, and it's never how the medications might have contributed to that. Yet if somebody's off the meds, it's like, well, they went off their meds and that's why they killed themselves or ended up dead. I don't think he was intending to kill himself, but unfortunately that's what happened. Plus, if he didn't do this all the time and then took one dose of some powerful street drug, that is more likely to harm someone. Or maybe even being on psych meds and then taking a street drug at the same time can be worse than just taking it when one's not taking any psych meds. There's so many factors here and so many questions, and it's just really tragic to see how someone can have so much good going on apparently and yet be struggling so much. And it's partly, it seems to me, that he was taking so much on of other people. He was trying to help people so much. And when you reach out to people in that way and you're sensitive and empathic, you literally take on their suffering. You just look at the person, you look into their eyes, and all the information is transmitted to your being. So if you're around more people and looking into their eyes, you're going to feel it. I feel it just from being home and seeing different people and just having a sense people aren't thriving. Yet at the same time, here's this person that is apparently thriving on the outside but isn't thriving. So what can one even know? What can one even do? But if he had thoughts and impulses that were out of control, well, for me, self-dialogue is a way to speak to myself in a way on the outside that is within my power to do. So I feel like if I don't do that, and not just if I don't do that, but by doing this type of conversation and dialogue, it helps me to process some of these things that I see and some of the suffering that I see. In seeing all this suffering the last few days, I just feel like, wow, I need to talk to myself. Because I'm feeling it. And yet, if he is trying to help and trying to help and trying to help and taking all that on, it's going to create more inner struggling. I feel like if I was to go out there and feel like I can help people and talk with them and take it all on, and I'm sensitive, I'm literally going to take it all on and it's going to crush me. I feel like I can't even go back to peer support for 5 minutes, let alone be a teacher in the way he was and actually feel like I can help people. I feel like I can't help anybody. I feel like I can pretty much just talk to myself. The other thing is I could go out there and feel like I can help people, but then when I reach out, and I've talked about this to myself, I feel like I can't. So if I had that so-called manic energy come over me and then I start using that to try to help people, that might actually be part of what causes the crash. In my first time and map consciousness with all that energy. I'm trying to help this person, trying to help that person, just bouncing around synchronistically and randomly, trying to help. And then maybe that's part of like a helper's high, like so-called mania induces a helper's high, and it's a real high. The body is actually making its own internal molecules getting high on helping. But since it's getting high on helping, it's not sustainable, and one crashes and goes through depression or so-called psychosis or something. And so I'm wondering, I don't know, but I'm wondering if helping is the wrong orientation altogether. I don't know if anyone has really helped me by trying to help me. The people that have helped me more have just really been there. So I wonder if I can just be there, and then that will lead to some suffering for me because of what I'll see and perceive with this sensitivity, and then being able to talk to myself about it. Not go out and think I can actually help. And that's why I sort of want to start this social enterprise just with this conversation. I really feel like I can't help anybody. And I got another hint of that because there was this child, and I was trying to say, oh, put some coconut oil on your eyes, it'll make them not itch. And I said it a couple times, and then eventually the child said about me that I was trying to force them into putting coconut oil on, and I was like, wow, that's a powerful lesson. Here I am thinking, well, I'm an adult, I know something about coconut oil, it's going to help. But the child didn't want it. And when I heard what they said, I was like, wow, that's a powerful lesson. Not to push anything, even as simple as coconut oil on eyes on someone. People would really need to ask. So this is getting long, but, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't really like making stuff up about people or making guesses, but this official statement of Michael Stone's passing sort of invited one to do so. And it talks about impulses. What can we do for ourselves and others who have impulses or behaviors we cannot understand? Well, it was an impulse to relieve suffering. And aren't we all doing that in small ways, whether it's reaching for a cookie or yelling at somebody or whatever? We're all doing it. And then some people have it to more of an extent, especially when they're more sensitive. And then to relieve suffering, one might actually just accidentally or on purpose put an end to it all. The final gesture